Hello, fellow patriots, and welcome to the first installment of In the Zone with the Zonan. I will be speaking of areas of vital importance for all U.S. citizens. Suffice it to say that I will literally be the proverbial voice crying out in the wilderness, or more appropriately, crying out from the desert, since this broadcast originates from 13 miles north of Tucson, Arizona. You know, the reason I'm undertaking this task of broadcasting every couple of weeks to my fellow citizens is because I'm greatly disturbed by the direction our great nation is heading. It reminds me of a song written by one of my favorite country music singers of all time, Merle Haggard. Are the good times really over for good? Especially a particular phrase in there comes to mind. Are we rolling downhill like a snowball headed for hell? Well, quite frankly, we are. Our nation is heading that direction unless we right the ship. How do we do that? Well, it starts by getting the information out there in order to hold the authorities in the federal government accountable for their actions or for their failure to act in some instances. Now, I will begin with a topic that is near and dear to my heart: illegal immigration. There are at least 12 million illegal immigrants within the United States of America at this time, and that is totally acceptable. The federal government has refused to do their constitutional duty, which is to secure the borders of every state in the nation from foreign invasion. The federal government has refused to do it, and let me tell you, that is unacceptable. How can you have homeland security when you don't have secured borders? Last year, hundreds of illegal immigrants were captured in southern Arizona after they had illegally immigrated to the United States via the Mexican border. These hundreds of immigrants I'm talking about weren't from Mexico, South America, or Central America. They were from the following nations: Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, Yemen, China, Somalia, the Sudan. You get the drift? The vast majority of those populace of those nations hate the United States of America. How many of those that came in from those countries were and are terrorists? The Lord only knows. As a matter of fact, there's one terrorist group, Hezbollah, that currently has a terrorist training camp 50 miles south of the Arizona-Mexican border in Mexico now. That's not a guess or a supposition. That's an actual fact. When is the federal government, particularly the President of the United States, going to get serious about securing the border? After the terrorists detonate a nuclear bomb in one of our border states? Is that what it will take? Really? Really? Of course, the terrorists are not the only ones we have to worry about. The Sinaloa, Zeta, MS-13 drug cartels are running rampant, not only in Mexico, but in the United States of America. As a matter of fact, over 230 cities, U.S. cities, are infested with these thugs. I call them, quite frankly, they are terrorists, because they routinely murder people who get between them and their drug or human smuggling trade. Make no mistake about it. They have and will continue to murder anybody who gets between them and their ill-gotten gain. They have murdered ranchers, border patrolmen, police officers, and anybody else, any U.S. citizen gets their way. And what did one Mexican ambassador say about these people not long ago? I quote. He says, "Our drug cartels are not terrorists, they're just businessmen." Yeah, businessmen like the mafia. Businessmen who don't mind murdering people, decapitating them, and what have you, in order to intimidate anybody who gets in their way. But those are businessmen. That's what the Mexican ambassador said. Don't look for the Mexican government to cooperate with the United States of America. Why? Because the Mexican government's bought and paid for by the drug cartels. In the 1980s, the United States had similar problems with the drug cartels in Colombia. We sent troops down there, and we cleansed them of the drug cartels. That's because the Colombian government wanted us to. They wanted us to cooperate with them. They wanted our help. Mexican government doesn't. Make no mistake about that, because they're as corrupt as the drug cartels. They're in cahoots with them. And that's fine. That's fine. But let me tell you, we won't send our military into Mexico because they don't want us. But what we need to do is bring our U.S. military back home where they belong and put them on the Mexican border. As far as I'm concerned, our U.S. military, the best interest of the United States of America, are best served by putting our military on the Mexican border than in some far-off land over in Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, or what have you. Some say, well, the illegal immigrants, they're not all criminals. You know, they've got families, this and that and the other. They just come here to work. They want a job. Wonderful. Last I checked, the unemployment rate in the United States of America is 9%. We don't have enough jobs for the U.S. citizens. So how in the world are we going to supply jobs to the illegal immigrants? The sad truth is, and the inconvenient truth, I'm sorry, Al Gore, but the real, true, inconvenient truth is simply this. The United States of America cannot afford to house, clothe, feed, educate, and provide medical services for every human being on planet Earth. It would be nice, but we just can't. And if we continue to allow people from all over the planet just to flood in our country freely and at their free will, our economy will utterly and totally collapse. Guess which nation provides the most charity and generosity and quite frankly, financial aid to other countries? You guessed it, the United States of America. If we fall and become just one of the other third world countries, who's going to fill that void? Who's going to provide those charitable donations and aid and help out the poor and impoverished? You got it. No one. Oh, by the way, they say they just come here to work. You do realize that the 95% of the illegal immigrants are identity thieves. They commit identity theft by stealing other people's social security numbers and IDs. Last I checked, that's a felony in the United States of America. And when we catch them, do we charge them with identity theft? Oh, no. We just deport them back to Mexico or whatever, deport them back to whatever country they came from so they can cross back across the border and commit even more felonies. Sometimes we don't even do that. We just bring them in the front door and let them out the back door. Don't even deport them. And sometimes when the people do serve time in our prisons, instead of deporting them back to their countries, we just release them on the street. Just release them on the street. Again, the federal government derelict in their duties. And does Obama want to do anything about it? Of course not. He wants those votes. He wants those illegal immigrant votes. He realizes each illegal immigrant votes 3 or 4 times in the presidential election because he's got 3 or 4 different identities and social security numbers. I realize a legal immigrant has more voting power than a U.S. citizen does in our country. Oh yeah, and then they said, well, you need to go after the fat cats, you know? Don't worry about the illegal immigrants, those poor guys. Goes after the fat cats as employment. Great state of Arizona did. In 2008, Arizona passed their employer sanctions law to go after them, to make it a crime for any employer to knowingly hire an illegal immigrant. What did the federal government do in response to that? They filed suit against the state of Arizona for doing that. We can't bargain win for losing, can we? No matter what we do, we're wrong. Our great state of Arizona, we passed Senate Bill 1070, so authorize our local law enforcement officers to assist the federal government in enforcing federal immigration laws. Because the federal government apparently has been an utter failure in securing the border and enforcing federal immigration laws. Instead of thanking us for that, what does the federal government do? File suit against us for it. Well, I got good news in that regard. Governor Jan Brewer has announced that we have over $4.5 million on the Arizona Legal Defense Fund, completely raised by nothing but donations from patriotic people throughout the great United States of America. So we're going to take this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court, and don't you worry about that apple. Another thing we did this last week, by the way, we just passed a law in the state, passed a bill into law that Arizona Governor Jan Brewer signed into law last week, which authorizes the state of Arizona to build its own border fence. Why? Because the federal government refuses to complete the border fence. So that's fine. We'll use Arizona monies, which, by the way, which a lot of it will be donated to build our own border fence. I got a great prediction for you. I bet you the federal government will very soon file suit against us for trying to build our own border fence. And lastly, you got ignoramuses that will make illegal immigration a racial issue. It ain't got nothing to do with race. I'm of Irish descent. If Ireland was on our southern border, I would be just as vehemently opposed to illegal immigration. It has absolutely nothing to do with race. It's something that the liberals throw up when they lose the logic and common sense argument, because they know logically they can't win. So they immediately throw up the race card and become emotional, throw up the race card. Sorry, that don't get it. That don't work. Last I checked, illegal is not a race, but it is a crime. Anyway, until my next broadcast in a couple of weeks, remember, stay in the zone with the Zonan.